Welcome to Nuclear Throne. Here's what you can expect. Okay, that's the video, see ya. Alright, but seriously, it's hard to describe the quality of this game otherwise because the kind of energy that radiates from it has to be experienced firsthand. It's a game that stands on its own by virtue of just being fun as fuck, and I feel as though I'd have to revoke my gamer card if I'd continued my existence on this mortal coil without playing it. There's a reason people commonly cite it as a classic, and even after 8 years since the game's release, nothing has come along that hits quite like this game does. Not just because of the things it does incredibly well, but more so for the things that it doesn't do or have. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, on paper, Nuclear Throne doesn't sound like the heavy hitter its reputation would suggest. It doesn't have, say, the boss variety of something like Gungeon or Isaac, nor does it come close to either of those games' volume of power-ups, weapons, and so on. It doesn't have the lucrative meta-progression of games like Hades, unless you count golden weapons and crowns, I don't personally. But the beauty of this game is that it doesn't need that volume or type of content. In fact, this game is better for it. The way Nuclear Throne achieves this, ironically, is through consistency rather than unpredictability. The same enemies can be expected in the same areas in any given run, the same bosses show up at the same intervals with the same attacks and behaviors. The pool of weapons available starts incredibly small at the beginning of a run, with more powerful weapons steadily dropping as you delve deeper into the later parts of the game. Even the pool of power-ups mostly consists of reliable bonuses and buffs, and the rate at which you level up to acquire them remains mostly constant on any given run. Several of these aspects of the game are things I would likely, and have, criticized other games for, but I consider praiseworthy in this context. Though why exactly are these good things for Nuclear Throne in particular? Because of two things. This game is hard and fast. Like, just look at how quickly you can go from booting up the game to starting a run. And in equal measure, you'll be flying through the starting floors, then die to the first boss before you've even realized what just happened. You're gonna die in this game, a lot. You might even say it's the Dark Souls of any run can end at the drop of a hat. There is practically no grace period after getting hit in this game, and several enemies have attacks that either hit you for your whole health bar or just straight up kill you outright, including most explosions from enemies, the environment, or your own weapons. Especially your own weapons. Enemies will shoot you from off-screen, bum rush you, and overall just be a bunch of meanies. You're gonna get pounded into the dust, but you actually won't care because it will happen so fast. In fact, you might enjoy it. See, this game isn't particularly long. A winning run only takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and the simple act of running through the game, even if you're dying a lot, is such a fun time in and of itself that you'll more than likely fall victim to the one more run mentality more than most other games in the genre. It's a kind of quality shared by your classic arcade titles where it puts you in the zone of self-improvement or high score chasing by making each attempt long enough to keep you invested, but short enough that you can't help but to toss in another quarter and go again. The gameplay of Nuclear Throne is simply that good, for a number of reasons. All of the guns feel incredibly satisfying to shoot. From the starting pistol to the endgame super bazooka, shooting stuff in Nuclear Throne just feels perfect. Shotguns in particular feel incredible to use with their inherent ability to bounce shots off walls. So much so that the base shotgun is actually one of my favorite weapons in the game. Another positive contributor to the gameplay is the fact that enemies are nearly just as brittle as you are, and this game throws a lot of them at you at once. While death could hit you at any time, it's just as likely an outcome for you to clear an entire floor of enemies in just a few seconds. Even bosses typically die incredibly fast if you have even moderately powerful weapons. Big Bandit? Dead. Big Dog? Dead. The boss the game is named after? Also dead. The enemies being on par with the player in terms of raw power is a unique characteristic to Nuclear Throne, and it makes a winning run feel all the more satisfying. A smaller but still important detail I want to mention is how the game promotes a more aggressive playstyle. Given the game's difficulty, it's likely a new player might start by taking things as slow as possible. The problem with this approach, however, is the risk of missing out on vital health and ammo pickups, as well as rads, the currency need to level up. These drops only stick around for a few seconds, so the player has to embrace a more aggressive playstyle if they don't want to miss out on these important pickups. Also worth noting is the loop mechanic, which allows the player to warp back to the beginning of the game with a much increased difficulty. And when I say increased difficulty, I mean like way harder. Nuclear Throne is one of the first roguelikes to incorporate a feature like this, and I wager it played a major role in similar mechanics popping up in other games. All of these aspects contribute to what is some of the most fast-paced and gratifying gameplay in the genre, and is a big reason why Nuclear Throne still stands out all of these years later. Now, I mentioned earlier that the strength of Nuclear Throne is in its consistency, but that isn't to say there is a lack of RNG at play here. Every floor is procedurally generated, with each different area having distinct enemies, patterns, and layouts to its floors. For example, the starting desert area is generally more open, whereas the sewers feature more tight corridors and hallways. Enemies also vary in quantity every floor, and each zone features different types to that particular zone. Weapons are also varied enough to be interesting, but have a much more rudimentary design philosophy than in other games. This makes almost every weapon useful in some capacity, and it makes situations where you're scrambling to find something decent to defend yourself with pretty rare. While there aren't any alternate bosses, their dynamic way of entering the battlefield and how quickly they can be killed helps keep them from feeling like a chore to contest with. Except Little Hunter. That dude in his stupid jetpack. Piece of shit. There are also some secret areas and alternate shortcuts if you're feeling cheeky and want to shake things up. And of course, there are several characters with different abilities that offer slight variance to the gameplay. Fish can roll. Crystal can shield to block bullets. Fish can roll. Steroids can dual wield. And, most importantly, fish can roll. The culmination of all of these traits creates just enough variance to keep things interesting in the hundreds if not thousands of runs you'll be making if this game hooks its teeth into you like it did for me. Now, if I had to describe Nuclear Throne's presentation in one word, it would be crunchy. The sound effects are front-loaded and punchy, with weapons, death sounds, and especially explosions pressing an all-out assault on the bass frequencies that does a great job of evoking a sense of reckless chaos. Visually, the simplistic pixel art graphics seamlessly emulate the classic arcade games that came before it. The tiny sprites for the characters and many of the enemies are honestly kind of cute for a game that's so action-focused. My personal favorite touch is the character selection screen that offers an unexpected sense of coziness with all the different characters sitting around a campfire just doing their own thing. My favorite is the fact that Steroids of all people is reading a book. Just look at him, he's so smart. The highlight, however, is with the music. From the title theme to the end credits, the unique soundtrack from Jukio that guy, I feel is what really establishes this game's identity. I'm struggling to find the words to describe it, but just know that while you're playing it, it just feels right. I usually make a point to just sit and listen to the end credits music whenever I beat a run simply because of how good it is. So one more thing, I only just found this out while editing. The gibberish the mutants make isn't gibberish, it's actual speech. So the voice of many of the characters in the game, Jonas Turner, created an entire translation guide for what they're saying. So they're actually saying things, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know, I just felt like mentioning that. Now, despite Nuclear Throne's status as a classic, I still have a few bugbears with it. The big one is the fact that it runs at 30 FPS, which I feel is strange for a game with such simplistic visuals. If you own the game on Steam, you can fix this by enabling the latest beta version in the launch settings or via mods, and the game is so much better with this enhanced visual clarity. If you're playing the game on a different platform, however, you're SOL. I also would have liked to have widescreen support, which, again, can be fixed by mods, but I don't like to handwave issues I have with games by saying, but with mods, sprinkles can only do so much if the vanilla is running at 30 FPS, you know? I do understand, however, that the 4x3 display was a conscious choice to balance the number of enemies on screen at a time, so I can forgive it for that reason. My other problem with the game is that, due to how quickly you can die, some deaths just end up feeling cheap. I understand the developer's vision of having no grace period after taking damage, but biting the dust from even the smallest mistakes can be frustrating. While the sting of these deaths doesn't hit quite that hard due to the average duration of a run, they're stings nonetheless. I swear, if I died in an exploding car because I didn't realize the enemy I was killing was the last one on the floor. Also, just a pro tip for when you boot up this game for the first time, mute your headphones and knock the master volume down to like 15% unless you're going for the tinnitus % world record speedrun. Despite these issues, however, they haven't stopped me from coming back over and over for Nuclear Throne's special brand of mayhem, and I don't see them being deal breakers for most other people either. So, you know how I said a while ago how Gungeon was my favorite standby game? Well, it's not anymore. This is my new favorite standby game. Nuclear Throne is one of those games that I'll be able to come back to kill an hour or 3 for a few years at the very least. It's a simple, compact game that, while difficult, is almost kind of a comfort game in that you know what to expect with a little bit of variance to keep it from being too samey. It encapsulates the feeling of the classic arcade games that came before it, invoking that sense of one more try that reminds me of how I feel when I'm glued to a Galaga cabinet at an arcade. That simplicity is what makes it hold up even after releasing almost a decade ago, and it wouldn't shock me for fans of it to still be playing it a decade from now. I know I'll probably still be playing it, going for the goddamn Everything Hurts achievement, which is basically the equivalent of a no-hit run.